welcome to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. I'm your host, Brandon. We're here for another topic discussion. As always, we got Michael joining us from Virginia Beach. How you doing today, Michael?
Great as always. Thank you for having me, Brandon. I'm excited to see what we got.
Always good to see you, man. Always good to catch up. You know, before we jump into this one, I do just want to say, like, I'm grateful. You know, we're just coming off our gratitude challenge, you know, last Friday going into this week before we hit our next one. And it's just been I've been really grateful for the experience to reconnect, you know, touch on different aspects of where our lives went after we kind of separated and now coming back together to talk about those experiences and raise some awareness and have some tough conversations that can be hard to have at times. So, you know, I just want to say I'm grateful for this opportunity to reconnect and tackle some of these topics and ideas with you, man.
Absolutely. It's grateful to be around, someone who I was around a lot back then and seeing you doing well. So for me, that's been huge and kind of lifted me up a little bit too, knowing that you're trying to do something big for more than just yourself. So yeah, man, I've been loving it so far. Hard conversations, like you said, but good to have. Once we get them out in the open, I think a lot more people will be able to relate and hopefully help.
Yeah, man, I love it. So let's jump into today. Today we're going to tackle embracing failure, which can be a really tough thing in life at times. It can definitely create some mental health battles if failure starts kind of taking over our mindset, if we start seeing ourselves as a failure. And I think that's, you know, kind of to start it off, I think that's one of the biggest things to do with failure is separate the action from the person, right? You can say you failed at something and that's okay. But we don't always want to direct that to saying, oh, I'm a failure at everything. Because I failed at this one thing means I'm always going to fail, or it means that's just who and what I am. I'm a failure, and that's, you know, the only path that's going to happen for me. Is because that happened once, it's going to continue to happen. So I think kind of just starting that off with separating that action from the person can be really, really important on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Failure in of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when you kind of use that as a description of yourself, like I'm a failure because of this or because of that or because I can't do this or can't do that, that's when you cross over that threshold of it being unhealthy and can create the negativity, whether it stays inside or you project it out towards friends and family. And yeah, nobody wants to be around you when you're like that. I know I was like that myself for a while in life, and I wasn't a pleasant person to be around because I was just always exuding negativity, and it's tough and it's not an easy thing to go through. At the same time, it's important to embrace, because if you don't, you'll be stuck in that mindset for a long time.
Yeah, and I think failure we can look at it in a lot of different ways, whether we just, you know, we're failing at our work life, or we're failing at, you know, relationships, or we're failing in personal life. And I mean, just kind of relating to what you just said is, you know, when I was heavily using and those really dark moments when things were really bad, and I viewed myself as just, I'm a failure. You know, there was a week there where, you know, my relationship ended. I dropped out of college and I lost my soccer scholarship. I mean, I don't even know if that was a week. I think it was like 2 or 3 days. You know, I remember coming up to you and saying, and you were like, how'd your meeting go with Ned? And I was like, I'm off the team. I'm going home, you know? And yeah, exactly. And I remember just on that trip home, when I was driving home, thinking how much I failed at everything I was just trying to accomplish and how it all ended in a blink of an eye. And I think holding on to that and labeling myself as like, oh, I'm a failure at life, so now I'm just going to go get high all the time, you know, that kept driving me deeper and deeper and deeper into where it was, you know, such a struggle to ever change any of the habits I developed as labeling myself as that failure.
Yeah, and those habits are so deadly because it just doesn't let you get out of it, and you just want to keep doing it because you're feeding yourself the same lie, because it is a lie. Even though you did fail at something, you did leave the team and scholarship gone, relationship over, and that was in a short period of time. I think that I was maybe grateful and blessed because of the conversation that you had with him that I heard. I think that helped me embraced the fact that I wasn't really doing what I was supposed to be doing either, because we were both getting high before practice, right after practice, missing practice, no less, calling Ned, yeah, Ned, I'll be there. 5 minutes after practice started, just completely not being responsible the way we had the year before. And that's where I got lucky because I had the conversation second. But there's not to say that I wasn't in that same mentality, because I also started to feel like now I'm separating myself from the team because I'm doing these things and they're not looking at me the same. They're looking at me like a bum, or that I am in essence a failure because I haven't fulfilled my soccer commitment up to that point. And I'm supposed to be one of the, quote unquote better players on the team. It doesn't sit well when that really wasn't a thought I've ever went through before. So that was kind of a challenge for me, even though I stayed on the team.
Yeah, and I think that shows like how we handle those situations differently, right? And how we respond to those situations differently just as people. I mean, we were really kind of in that exact same position. Like you said, we were together, skipping out on practice, and I'm pretty sure I faked an injury at the time to where I was just like I wasn't even expected to show up. I mean, I was, but not do much. And that was my mindset when I went down there. Is when I went down and had that conversation, it was like, all right, I'm already failing at this stuff, and I don't feel good about what I'm doing or who I am. And so like kind of just a big F you, in his face. It was our conversation was real quick. And that was when I was just like, all right, yeah, I failed. And I'm going to keep going down that path. Whereas you at least had that mentality in that moment to say like, all right, yeah, I messed up, but now I'm going to start trying and try to pull this back. And I think, at times we can do that. At times it's harder. But that's where it's so important to embrace that at times, because when we can embrace failure, we can start moving ourselves forward and then responding in better ways as we go.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, I think, for most people, especially me, even in that moment where I decided to make the choice to stop smoking and play and go to practice and honor my scholarship. I still just wasn't quite, past that. And I know that it's easy to fall into those thoughts, and then those thoughts lead to actions, kind of in your case where you just went home, and unless you don't understand why you're doing it beyond you feel like you just didn't succeed at anything you did in life up to that point or in that moment, yeah, you're not going to want to do anything. And then it's going to just cause that loop of, I don't want to do this. I'm a failure, so I don't want to do that. I'm a failure. No one's going to want to talk to me. I don't want to be around anybody. But once you start to understand that, no, you're not a failure yourself. Yeah, you had bad choices, or maybe you made bad decisions, but responding to those decisions with worse decisions only makes it worse. So you have to, at some point, find that switch where I can't keep thinking this, otherwise I will never go anywhere, and I'll just be what I say I am. And that's the hard part. That's the scary part.
That response thing that you just said, I think is really that idea behind embracing failure, right? I can look at, especially now looking back in my life, I can look at a lot of different times where my response to that failure was that mindset that I am a failure. So then I made that same decision that messed everything up. I made it again, and I made it again. Or I started making worse decisions, because it was like, especially in the drug life that I was in, once I crossed one line, it was a little bit easier to cross that next line. And it was a little bit easier to cross that next line. And that's where I, in some of those moments, like I made some really bad decisions and ended up in some really bad places. I mean, I'm really lucky and blessed that, I haven't had any long-term effects. So I didn't do any, time or anything like that. But, that was my response always was, oh, I messed up. Oh, well, that means I'm a failure, so I'm going to keep messing up, and I'm just going to embrace this lifestyle. I'm going to go hard with, that addictive personality was like, I'm going to go hard with this, I'm going to use, I'm going to sell, I'm going to make these bad decisions. I'm going to get involved in the life as much as possible. And, my life just got worse and worse and worse all the time. And then that's where I could see that mindset of my response, because then there would be this brief moment, maybe for a month to 3 months, I would say at max, when I was using, where I would be able to pull things together. I'd be like, all right, I messed up. let's try to fix some of this. Actually, let's try to grow a little bit. And so I'd have a little bit of growth, and then I'd mess up, and I'd be like, well, it's back to the dope. I'm just gonna go right back to it because I tried, didn't work out. My life isn't moving, in any certain pace that maybe I was convinced it should be moving. And so embracing that failure in the wrong way and having that response in the wrong way would just destroy my life, constantly. I think, if you look back at my life from 18 to 25, on average, I was in a place for like 6 months before I would move and bounce and go somewhere else, or, whatever it may have been. And that was because even when I did try to pull it together and I had one mistake, boom, that mindset was back. I'm a failure. I messed up. I'm always going to be this way.
Yeah, that's tough. So tough because you could be doing good, like you said, for a month or two or three, and you're finally getting to the point where it's making a little bit more sense to really try, and all of a sudden, yeah, maybe I'm not as much of a failure, at least that terminology, as I think I was or I thought I was, and then that one action or that one decision that isn't right, and then the next 3 months are the same as it had been, and you just kind of start with square one, and when you finally get the strength to muster up doing it again, you just fall back in it. So 3 months up, 3 months down, 3 months up, 3 months down, and it's just a scary cycle that you went through specifically when it related to something very serious, very hard drugs, and not knowing, the consequence, or not even thinking about what those consequences might lead to a long term. Just I'm here, I'm doing it. This is how I feel. This is why I'm doing it. And for me, my experience was slightly different, in the sense that I was, stuck living at home with my parents, but all my friends were getting married and had places of their own with their significant others getting married. I don't know how many weddings I got invited to. After the seventh or eighth wedding and you're nowhere near it, you start to realize that I'm not really doing at least what I should be doing. And I'm failing. I clearly haven't found a woman to be with. And while people say, don't rush it, it's okay. Yeah, well, it started to feel like everybody else was leaving me behind. So I didn't know what to do. And so that's where I kind of had my more direct experience with just, well, I lost the one relationship that I had up to that point in college from, being smoking all the time and lying about it. So what good am I to anybody? I'm not going to be good for anybody else. I'm just going to do the same thing. And that's where I started to fall into that type of, I'm just not really worth much. And that's goes hand in hand with feeling like a failure because you don't really know what you're going to do, how you're going to do anything other than what you've been doing to keep you down. And you start to care less about life. And that's kind of where I started to go.
And I think, with what you were saying with like seeing that around us, right? Obviously we were in different positions, but I think we both saw some of that same stuff. People we went to college with, they were getting married or buying a house or starting a career, and there I was, either on my parents, in my parents' basement or on some dude's couch, or passed out in a dope house somewhere. And I'm a failure. Like, I should be at that point because that's what society tells me, or that's what the roadmap of life says you should be at this age or that age or this point in life. And I think that makes it a little bit easier to embrace failure sometimes. Even getting clean, and I still saw that stuff. I was like, man, I am a failure because I messed up. Even though I'm doing better and I'm trying to change my mindset, I'm starting to feel that way again. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we can overcome is, don't let those outside things influence and convince you that you're a failure. Everything's going to tell us we're supposed to do stuff a certain way, and you're never going to live up to that. You're never going to live up to doing something perfectly a certain way, just that exact way. And once we can be okay with that and be okay with having those mess ups and being okay with, slipping along the way or failing along the way, then we can realize, okay, I'm not a failure. Maybe I failed at this. Maybe I failed at this job. Maybe I failed at this relationship. Maybe I failed at making the right decision in this moment. But now I can learn from that. Now I can learn and say, all right, I failed in this action. This is why. So next time I'm faced with that decision or the next relationship or the next job or the next opportunity, I'm going to approach it a little bit differently because I already know what causes me to fail in that moment.
Yeah, I think in that specific, once you kind of hit that point, that's when the embracing switches from embracing it in a negative way to embracing it in a positive way. Knowing that, yeah, I messed this up, or I'm not perfect at this, and I am not that great at that, but I can get better at it, or I can do more. Once that switches, that mentality, that flip in your mind, you start to really see that, yeah, okay, I haven't been doing great, but not everybody's doing great. And even the ones that are, good for them, kudos to them. Doesn't mean I can't do great eventually. I'll get there. But that's the flip for me when I realized, kind of to your point, whatever the norms that society set out for us to be married by 25 and a kid by 28 or whatever that is, I knew that it wasn't for me. I would eventually find somebody. So at least how I felt. But that's where I started to embrace the kind of changes that you don't really think about when you're feeling that failure in a negative way. Like, yeah, I'm failing, but I'm not that far off of being great. And my sister was the prime example of what you'd expect. You know, college sweetheart. She actually went to the same college we went to and graduated, crazy enough. And then, yep, found her, when there was a football team at AB, met a football player, and, she's playing soccer, he's playing football. They met up and ended up getting married. And, that was college sweethearts, 24, wedding at 25, just had their first kid back in May. So it's just kind of like, it was like the story ending, the fairy tale ending that you'd expect, that you'd want to get. And I'm just sitting there on the sideline like, wow, this is what I should be doing. But it's okay because I'm not her, she's not me, and I will find a way to get to where I'm going. But that's where that switch really started to help me fail forward, if that makes sense, because that's what we don't always do. We always think we're failing and we fall backwards. Now I started to fail forward and realizing, hey, I'm not great. I'm getting better. I'm going to do things that I know that are going to get me in a position so I will be ready when the time comes for whether it's love, life in general, or just being a better person.
Yeah, failing forward, I think is a really good way to put that, and I think that shows that that's when we can start having some self awareness in that failure. Kind of like, where you were going with that was, all right, yeah, I failed in this moment, but now I have this self awareness to say, all right, yeah, this is where it messed up. Kind of going back to what you said earlier in that relationship you had, you were lying and smoking. That's self-awareness right there, right? I mean, that's where we can look at it and say, all right, yeah, this was my role in the failure of this relationship, or this was my role in the failure of whatever you failed at. And then when you can have that self-awareness and learn from that, that's where it gets better. Especially just kind of going with that relationship thing, is we all probably make that mistake in relationships, right? We try to sell or be something we're not, especially in the beginning. If we got a crush or we liking somebody or whatever it may be, we want to present our best self, and we want to hide some of those flaws, and we want to shut those doors that maybe show our scars, or those things we've been through, or those things we're still dealing with. And then that's where you can say, okay, well, I just got to be honest about this. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And then you either get accepted or you don't. And, I think having that self-awareness and failure can really start helping that idea of failing forward, because then we can use that as a stepping stone to the next part of greatness, right? We can use that failure as that next idea of saying, okay, now I got to step over to the right a little bit, got to step to the left a little bit. These are the things I got to dodge, watch out for, keep my eyes open about, and we can keep moving forward. And that failure is going to be a bump in the road. It's going to be, it's going to feel like life is ending sometimes, but that's when we're like, all right, now this is what I got to do to take that next step. I know I've hit a lot of those moments in my life, whether it was while I was using or while clean, especially clean, when I was trying to rebuild and starting, the only job I got was some guy in recovery who did lawn care. And that was the first thing I got. And then I got a coaching job, and then I got a coaching job at a high school, and then I got a job at a call center, and then I got a job at a youth center. And I was kind of just, building myself back up, and it took time. And I had my moments where I did mess up, and I've had moments where I was like, all right, maybe you really are just a failure, and that's why you're messing up your life again. And luckily those moments get shorter and shorter, and they don't fully take me over to where I do make that decision then where if I were to relapse or I were to use again, I lose everything in my life and I'm starting over. So I think that's a big part of it, is just that self-awareness to say, all right, I'm starting to see how this failure is shaping me to then be successful in whatever I want to be successful in.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit exactly what the word illuminate means for this, channel specifically is, shedding that light or that self-awareness in this case of, yeah, this is what I've done in the past, but I don't have to keep falling victim to the same things that I used to fall victim for that got me back into that same failure feeling that I've been around. That's the biggest part. And then I think as we transition from really that self-awareness, we can really start to pave a way forward. We can start to really see a plan and, as the second word, navigate our way through this kind of darkness, if you will, to where you start to tell yourself that you're not the failure that you have been telling yourself, and find the things that you can do that help bring back out the person that is successful in you, because we all have successful people inside of us. We sometimes lose sight of what we're good at or what we need to do, whether it's a job or recreation, that we can be our best self and start putting our best self forward. And I think I was the same way as when it comes to relationships. You try to have that swagger a little bit in the beginning. You're trying to, show your best self, like you said, and hide the other stuff. But ultimately, if it's going to be the one, that ride or die, they're going to need to know you, their best you and your worst you, and all in between. And if they're cool with it and you're cool with what their best is and their worst is, it might work out. And I'm grateful. Sounds like you're in a situation where it has, and I thankfully am as well. But I'll say 2019, I was far from it and no idea if it was going to be that way. So I'm blessed to know that I can have that self-awareness after the fact, because it's not easy in the moment. Believe me, it's not easy in the moment. But once you get to that level of being aware of what's going on, like you said, kind of avoiding the obstacles as they come at you, then you can start to step forward in between them. Instead of sidestepping like left or right, now you got to step forward and then left, right, forward, right, forward. And you actually start to move past the failure part of your life and can move into, really understanding how to be better or how to recover from that failure.
Yeah, recovering from failure, right? That's a huge part of it. And I want to, kind of hit on what you just said with, that idea of being a failure in those things, but then having people embrace you, when you fail. And I think that's where I push people away at times. And when they were like, well, you're just messing up, you can do better. Like, no, I suck. I'm a failure. And so I don't want you in my life, because I don't want to hear that good stuff or that positive stuff. And, that's something I would say to anybody, is keep those people in your life that are pushing you to do better, that see that failure as an action and not as you. And those are the people that are going to keep driving you and supporting you in life. And I know I isolated from those people. I pushed those people away. My parents at times, they never gave up on me, which I'm so grateful for. My wife, we met while I was still using, and she saw me go through some of like the darkest points of my addiction, and didn't see that and didn't give up on me. And embracing those people and pulling those people back in and letting their words actually seep into me, and embracing those words, I think is one really big thing we can do, is keep those people around you that are gonna push you to do better. I could probably look back on our relationship, and we probably weren't the best for each other in that moment, right? It was like, all right, we're going to get together and we're going to make some bad decisions. And I think that's where at times in life, we just got to see some of those things. And that doesn't mean we're always going to be apart. I mean, look at us now, 13 years later, coming back together and doing something really positive and really special. And I think that shows, like, you can love people, you can, have those great people in your life, but maybe that relationship isn't good for you right now, because we're kind of just inching into that failure together, instead of one of us being like, hey, you failed or you messed up, let's try it a different way. Instead, it was like, hey, I'm failing, I'm going to pull you down here and you're going to fail with me too, and I think that's a important thing to just kind of remind people of is, when you're in those dark places, you don't always want that positivity, or you don't want always somebody to kind of help pull you back. But I would highly encourage, if you're feeling like a failure and you got somebody around you that's saying you're not and pushing you to be better, man, pull that person in close.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's going to be the last thing you want to hear in that moment, but I promise you that you will be eternally grateful for not pushing that person out of your life, whether it's the next day, the next year, whatever the case is. When you start to really heal from that, you'll be so grateful that they stuck with you, like you said, your parents did and your wife. That's just something that you can't really put into words, and how expressive and how it makes you feel, because it's more than what words can describe. It's, just that always being there type of unconditional support, which you don't always get even from parents. And that's where it's just hard to accept that type of positivity when it is coming from maybe your best friend, and you don't know where you're going, and he's on top of the world, perfect job, whatever, perfect relationship. I don't want to hear what he has to say. He doesn't know me. We're not the same. So then what you do is what we did. You find the person that's just doing the same as you, maybe just as bad or worse. Hey, you're trying to get high, I'm trying to get high. Perfect. Let's get high together. Wait, nothing better to do. You want to get drinks too? Cool. Let's go make bad decisions. And that's what we would do. I mean, and that's, like you said, had we been deeper in it in college than we were, it could have been more serious, where someone was like, y'all can't hang out. Like, y'all need to find other people to be around and not just each other, because it's like a negative influence with a negative influence. That does not make anything more than a more negative influence. And while we had fun, it's one of those where I'm grateful that it was what it was and wasn't further, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are doing a lot more serious stuff, and it's because their friend or significant other they've done it with forever. Listen to that person that's not necessarily the one you want to hear, as I promise you, they will be the one that help pull you out, and they might be able to help both of you if it's two of you. You just have to give them a chance. Be open-minded about it, and I know it's not easy. It's not easy to be open about something you don't want to hear, especially in the moments you definitely don't want to hear it. But I urge you to, I challenge you that if you are going through it, find that person in your life that has been saying those good things to you, and just shoot them a message. Say, can we talk later? Just have a conversation with them. You'd be surprised how willing they're and able they're trying to help you without it forcing positivity down your throat. They just want to be a crutch for you if you need them. But sometimes we don't accept that. And that's what I would challenge anybody who is going through it. Just that, rely on that one person that is trying to help you. And you just may be surprised how much better you could feel even while you're still feeling down.
And I think that's part of embracing failure right there, is to be able to say, like, hey, I'm feeling this way. Like, either let me vent, or, can you point out something good that's in me, because I can't find it right now. And I think that's part of embracing failure. And I think, part of that is that internal aspect of embracing it as well. And just saying, like, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to fail. Everybody in life's going to fail, whether it's multiple times, whether it's one big time, whether it's a bunch of small times. We're going to fail at something, and we're probably going to fail at something quite often. And we're going to struggle with some different things quite often. And that's where, it's so important to continue, kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, to continue to separate that. Like, yeah, we're human. We're going to mess up. We're going to fail. That whole adage, nobody's perfect. And when we embrace that, that's where we can look at ourselves and inside and say, all right, yeah, I failed at this, but that doesn't mean I, the person, am a failure. That just means I messed up, or I failed, or I'm struggling with this challenge. And now how can I learn from that to take that next step? And I think that's part of that process of embracing, is you got to learn too, right? There were so many times where I didn't learn from my mistakes, and I kept making the same mistake over and over and over, expecting something different, definition of insanity right there. And, when I started to see that mistake and say, all right, this is where I messed up, this is where I got to do better, I started finding more success in my life. And, I started understanding what success means to me. Success to me, a big part of that is being happy, because I've struggled with that my whole life, but also being better for other people around me, because I know I haven't always been that at times, even recently at times, not even always going back to my addiction, but just at times where I struggle to be that person I need to be in that moment. And it's made my life better when I can separate all right, you're not a bad person. You're not a failure. You messed up. It's going to be hard to face that. Like you said earlier, you got to face those challenges, illuminate that, really put the light on those dark spots, because then you can bring that light into it. And then, like you said, and like kind of the channel set up, you navigate it, right? We set that path forward, and we have that journey that we're going to take to be able to then say, hey, look, I'm an example. This is how I did it. This is what I went through. This is how I'm still doing it, right? It's usually not a done deal as we go through life. So then you start to radiate those positive things out and give other people hope that are still struggling to change their mindset when it comes to the idea of failure.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you hit on it perfectly when you're talking about, especially that transition to navigate from illuminate, especially when it comes to embracing failure, is separating the verb from the noun. Failing, to fail, that's the verb, like an action. But you, like you said, are not a failure. It is not a noun, it is a verb. So to fail, yeah, we're going to fail at many things in life. If you even want to use that word as it, I just didn't do good here. Some people see that as failing, and I get that. But to call yourself a verb is almost improper grammar in a funny way to put it. It's not really real, but we're making it real because we tell ourselves that we are that. We are the verb, and now it's us. But no, it's not true. And that's I think the first key step to really getting to navigate the path forward, because if you don't have that separation, you can take a few steps forward, but you're going to probably take those same few steps back, maybe more steps back than forward, until you really know that I am not that. Even if I just lost my job, lost my house, lost my car, all of those things are trying things that would make you feel like a failure, even if you had just been feeling better about life and everything was going great. We are tested in very mysterious ways, and there's no real way to define how or why and what reason it is. But that's when being able to separate that and having that plan, knowing that I'm not going to just let this pull me back down, and then being able to act on that every day. I think that was the biggest transition for me. I wasn't always able to act on it. I could internalize it and conceptualize it so I understood it. But did I really act on what I was learning about myself? Not always. And that was my next big challenge. Once I started to get to that point, then I could actually share how I was feeling with other people. And then that radiation of energy started to go outward, not just get stuck inside. And it really helped me even discover more about myself that I maybe wasn't shedding the light on as well. And so it's cool how each step of the process you go, it kind of circles back full circle to the first part, so you can kind of keep that process. And I don't feel like it's just a narrow straight line, it's a circle, and you got to keep trying throughout that process. Otherwise you will kind of get stuck and fall vulnerable to not being as good as you were back to where you started. And that's kind of the goal, I think, of everything, is to try to keep that path forward, always radiate the positivity, and then illuminate back on your life in case things start feeling like they were before.
Yeah, and I love how you put it in that cycle, because it really is a constant cycle, right? As we go through life, we're constantly looking at where we're failing, and then we want to be better the next day. And I think that's what really can happen when we take that idea and that concept of embracing failure and we really apply it, right? You can probably find some kind of small failure in your life probably every day. I would assume most of us could. And when we can look at that and say, all right, this is where I failed today, maybe it was, maybe you did lose your car, or maybe you just forgot to brush your teeth. And that's, you see that as a small failure. And, then you say, okay, well, I got to set an alarm now, or, hey, I got to make that payment next time so I don't do that, or I got to plan better, or I got to budget better. We can find those different ways to grow every single day. And I think that's what embracing failure allows us to do. It allows us to grow. It allows us to continue to build to success. It allows us to continue to build to happiness, and it makes that an ever growing process. I think I would say that you never fully get there. It's never just a moment in life where things stop and you made it and it's done. Unless you pass away, then it's done. But until that moment, you can grow every single day. You can find new ways that say, hey, I can do this better. or I can grow in this aspect, or I can be, just a little bit better than I was yesterday. So that way I'm constantly striving to be that best possible person. And again, we're all going to fail. We're all going to go through those tough moments, those tough challenges. And when you embrace it, when you shine that light on the failure, when you illuminate that failure, then you can say, all right, this is what that failure looks like. Now I'm going to create that picture of what that success looks like.
Yeah, that's huge. That transition in mindset and just your overall approach is almost not using that fail word, especially as you get really good at feeling better about yourself, is I just haven't gotten good at this yet. And that yet word that we always come back to, or I'm just not quite doing as well at this as I could be. I didn't fail, and I'm not a failure. I just haven't reached my personal best. I haven't achieved a top performance. Like for me at work, for example, I have a goal to sell a certain a number of cars, and when you don't sell a car in a day, yeah, I mean that's a small failure. It's a loss. You didn't make money that day. That's how it felt like for me today. I was doing great, had a lot of good conversations, but customer didn't purchase a vehicle, and that's going to happen. While my goal is still the same for the month, that just means that the next day I have to work a little bit harder to get to that goal that I'm going for. And while it's easy to say that, you have to actually act on that thought. You have to have that plan, but actually act on it, meaning don't get lazy. Every small failure for me, I didn't make a phone call at the right time, or I didn't say maybe this to the customer the way I should have. All of those can be little failures or little chances to improve. And I think that type of transition in mindset helps you start to do better, even if you didn't do great that day or that month or whatever you're striving to be good at. It's okay to have moments if you're actively looking to be better and find the solution. That's when you start to transition from just that type of mindset of I'm kind of okay, you're in that limbo. I'm not a failure, but I'm not really that successful. That's when you really get to the point of feeling, okay, what does success mean to me? For you, being happy, providing for other people. For me, it's similar, providing for family, since I never really had done that before. Being able to pay my own bills and have money left over is a success for me. Just being able to enjoy life without the stress that a lot of people feel every day is a success for me. Find the success for you. Maybe it's a small step of budgeting better so you don't have to worry about not eating before your paycheck. Maybe it's just having a little bit more time to yourself away from the kids, even if it's a few minutes. Whatever that means to you to start to build towards success, I encourage you to find it and embrace that as well. With the embracing of failure transitions to the embracing of success. Find that success and then embrace that, because before you know it, you'll be the one happy and healthy, helping someone else who was in your spot the same.
Yeah, and I want to just shine a light real quick, on something you just said there with that whole the stress thing and failure. And when you view yourself as a failure, life is going to be stressful because you're never going to feel good enough. You're never going to feel like you can make it. You never feel like, well, if I'm a failure, I'm never going to be successful. Or if I'm a failure, I'm never going to be happy. If I'm a failure, I'm never going to have these things in life that I want to have. And when you can just say, well, I failed at this. So, I really liked your analogy with work. Yeah, you didn't hit your goal today. That just means you gotta bump up that for next time, or you got to work harder the next day to get that goal for the bigger goal. Right. And I think that's a perfect thing with it, because, when you just take that action as you failed and you learn from it, and that's the mindset you're embracing, then it's less stressful. Then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take something of this to better myself tomorrow. I'm going to take something this and to better myself at the next opportunity that arises. I think that's where we can find a lot of importance with embracing failure. And then as you go, like you said, don't just, embrace that failure, but start to embrace that success, ride that success, understand, this is success. I can be successful, and really take that in and enjoy it when you have those moments where you feel it. And, so we're both just encouraging you, to embrace that failure. You are not a failure. You may fail at certain things. You may mess up. You might have prolonged moments of failure, as we do at times, but that does not mean you can't get up and try again. That does not mean you can't look back at that failure and say, this is what messed up. this is what I got to do next time. You're fully capable, and that's coming from somebody who never thought I'd be capable of doing that stuff. When you can put in that work, start to change that mindset, embrace that failure, that's where you can get to your life. You can get your life to whatever that happiness and success means to you.
Yeah, 100%. I think that if you're gonna fail, fail forward, and remember you're not a failure. You just failed in that moment or that life of what you did in that moment of life. It's not you as a person. It's not a definition of you as an individual. It's something that you can overcome. You have to learn from it, though. Find the actions that you can do that help offset those failing moments, and remember that everybody's going to fail, and everybody that's ever lived has failed at something in their life. So just because you have and you haven't seen somebody else have, I guarantee you they have too. They've found a way to overcome it. They've found their success and happiness and how they can handle it. And you can too. And that's what we really encourage you guys to do. Let us know, some stuff you've maybe gone through and that you've specifically had struggles with, whether it was embracing failure or just feeling like a failure. Let everybody try to help out, because I know that sometimes just hearing one or two things from somebody you've never met or somebody you've known all your life can mean all the difference in how you can approach, or I should say reapproach, your life and how you're trying to overcome failure specifically. I know that for me, it's been a blessing to reconnect with you directly, because I know that we've had moments together even that we consider being a failure, more directly than others. But directly speaking, for me, just almost not being on that team as well, and then imagining, where my life may have went as well. And, while yours took a turn set to the left, you pull that thing right back, and now you're doing better than a lot of people could hope to do, even after going through what you went through. And that makes me know that I could have as bad of a day as I think is a bad day. It's really not that bad of a day. I might have failed. I might have went through some stuff, but there's a lot of other people out there in the world going through a lot worse, and I have the tools to do something about it. I think that's the focus that sometimes we forget when we are trying to overcome failure.
Yeah, I love that. I have the tools that I'm going to use to do better and get better and recover and continue that process of personal growth and just growth in life. So again, I appreciate it. I appreciate the kind words again. Like I'm going to reiterate what I said in the beginning. I'm grateful we've been able to do this again. I feel like looking back and kind of labeling it, even though it's weird, like you said, we had fun back then. I'm not going to lie about it. It was that we definitely had some good moments. But when you look back at the bigger picture, we definitely didn't push each other to be the best people we could back then. And I think now we can do that in a lot of different ways, and which is why I'm really enjoying this process, and I think, just having that message, which today that message is embrace that failure, be better than you were yesterday, and continue that growth, or at least do your best to do that. You are not a failure. You might have failed, but you are not. And so we want to leave you with that. Thank you again, Michael, for being here and joining in on this conversation.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. Let's spread the love and positivity.
Oh yeah. So like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Get involved in what we're doing here as much as you want. We want to continue to grow it and have that conversation with more people and inspire that hope in others as well as ourselves as we go through this process. So this has been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.